All right, guys, before we get started today, a big thank you to our partner, Microsoft Surface, celebrating 10 years of partnership with the NFL. As the official laptop, tablet, and sideline technology provider for the LA Chargers, Microsoft Surface provides players and coaches with the tools to succeed both on and off the field every day. Learn more about Surface at surface.com. And welcome into the final drive, a Tuesday morning edition after the Chargers eke out a 19-16 overtime win over the Denver Broncos. As always, joined by team reporter Hayley, Elwood, and senior writer Eric Smith. Guys, there's so many different directions we can go. I got fan questions we'll get to in a little bit because I figured there was so much that happened, we may miss it, right? Let's start with the hero, Dustin Hopkins, though. 4 field goals and an extra point, 13 of the 19 points. The Chargers needed every single one of them. He hurts his hamstring in the first half, has to gut it out. It was an ugly game. I don't want to belabor the point because I think everybody knows it was an ugly game. 19
pretty.
total penalties, 240 yards of penalties. Unbelievable. Hayley, just start with you on Dustin and really what you saw last night.
I think my biggest takeaway from this game was, for the first time, I think, in quite some time with the Chargers, I know Brandon Staley called it a complete team win after the game, but it was very clear the offense was not at the same level as like the defense and special teams was last night. So by saying that, I'm going to flip it and say it was nice to see a win that wasn't on the shoulders of Justin Herbert for once, that you really had these 2 rookies come in and make this crazy special teams play at the end of the game, and then Dustin Hopkins comes in and kicks the game winner. Throughout everything, he went through the entire game. And so I think to see 2 other phases of this Chargers team work together to then come out and eke out a victory in what you mentioned was not a pretty game and not a fantastic game by any means, I think was encouraging to see. And obviously there are some things I think that this offense kind of needs to get right as they move forward throughout the season. But to have it sort of not just always be on Justin, I think was a refreshing kind of takeaway and something that I don't think we've seen in a long time. You know, we haven't really seen special teams with these Chargers units really kind of come out. And I know Eric has been with Ryan Ficken for many years and can probably speak to what he's been able to bring to this unit. But I just thought that was really encouraging. And what can you say about Dustin Hopkins? I mean, when the team signed him last year, it was like, okay, they got their kicker, and to grit out the performance that he did was just absolutely incredible. And I mean, it remains to be seen his status for the rest of, these next few games and possible season at this point. But the fact that he was able to grit through everything last night was just incredible and just such a gutsy performance, and one that will not go unnoticed. If he's not the AFC Special Teams Player of the Week this week, come on. What are we doing here, NFL?
What are we doing here, NFL? Eric, I see Brandon McManus, a healthy Brandon McManus on the other side, probably the best kicker of football outside Justin Tucker, or top 3, top 5, whatever you want to say. And then you got an ailing Dustin Hopkins, who was hurt really from the beginning, from that first extra point that he kicked. You would think advantage Broncos in that overtime. How about Jasir Taylor? What a heads-up play by him, setting up Dustin for the game winner.
Yeah, great play by Ja. And I think that's the type of play that was going to be needed to win the game, because as we kind of hit on, both offenses were pretty much going nowhere.
Yeah.
I think, literally they were going nowhere. And that's the kind of play it takes to win a scrappy, ugly game like that. Like, it's going to take a special team turnover. That may be the only special team turnover the Chargers get all year, maybe. But it's a huge play. And, Hayley brought up Ryan Ficken. That, obviously my guy. He was the Vikings special team coordinator last year, a longtime assistant in Minnesota. So I've been with him for it's 7 years in a row. I'm just following him around all over. But he's a good coach. And I know that the Chargers have a history with special teams, but when the Chargers hired him away and I was still in Minnesota, I was bummed because he's a great coach and players love playing for him. He has good scheme. I've kind of chatted with him, kind of here and there throughout the last couple of weeks. And he's like, man, I feel like we're right there, like as an overall unit. We're right there from making like a big play, whether that's a big return or a turnover or something like that. And it happened. It happened. Like he kind of sensed something was coming. But yeah, Chris, great play by Ja to block that Broncos player into the returner. That's a fair and legal play. It wasn't an interference or anything, and a great play by Dean Leonard, like two rookies to just change the tide of the game. Yeah, like on a night where it was ugly, like special teams come through. I can't say enough about Dustin Hopkins too. I'll give him a mention. Like he said after the game, every time he kicked, it felt like someone was stabbing him in the leg with a knife.
Yeah, that was a powerful quote in the locker room.
Tough stuff there.
Like, I can't do anything, like much less kick with that. So all the credit to him. Just a gritty win, and the Chargers had to have it.
I'm going through these numbers of Russell Wilson. So he started 10 for 10 and 116 yards and a touchdown in that first quarter. This is from Andrew Mason, who covers the Broncos. Mm-hmm. After that, 5 of 18 for 72 yards, a 43.8 rating. The Chargers defense figured something out after that first quarter, and I give that D a lot of credit. They schemed up some pressure with Derwin, and Drew got a couple sacks. Khalil had a sack. I think after Russell was 10 for 10, the 11th attempt, Mack batted the ball in the air, and maybe if he had an extra second, could have picked that off and really changed the game there. J.C. Jackson was benched in favor of Michael Davis in the second half. We'll get to that in a little bit. But, Hayley, you mentioned the offense, both sides. It was tough. It was tough to watch. Justin Herbert, 57 pass attempts without a touchdown. I think his final numbers, 37, 57, 238, and a pick. The running game couldn't get going. A lot of those attempts, Hayley, were kind of like extended runs. Corey Lindsley was not in this game. Corey Lindsley means a great deal to the Chargers offense. The worst 6 quarters that the Chargers have had this season were the 2 quarters in Kansas City where Corey went out and that Jacksonville game. Once he got back in, he stabilized that offensive line. They had to play without him. And listen, they did their best. When you win a game like this, and I think I asked Darwin this yesterday, it's almost more satisfying knowing that nothing really went your way and you still found a way to get it done against a division rival, Hayley.
Well, and I think in covering the Chargers for as many years as I've been here, and I think Chargers fans would agree to this, you haven't seen a lot of those types of games where you find the way, right? For many years, even we've been on this podcast talking about the final drive and been like, uh-oh. Whoops, yeah. Like that final drive didn't go the way that...
Why is this named the final drive?
Yeah. So I think that's an encouraging sign that this team is probably turning a corner there and that they did find a way to win. And I think when you look at the phrase complete team win, it's almost like complimentary team win to me, that you had these other units pick up where maybe one left off or wasn't pulling its weight. And I mean, that Broncos defense, though, give that group credit. They are incredible. That was probably, I mean, we had heard about it. We read about it all going into this game. And it is really clear that they are keeping that team in games. And it's kind of a shame with how much their offense has been struggling just defensively. This Broncos defense has been so good. And I think they have the number 1 red zone defense. And I mean, they held the Chargers 1 of 4 in the red zone last night. So when you look at little things like that, they're legit. And not having Keenan Allen, obviously, but not having Corey Lindsley was huge. At one point, Will Clapp goes out at center and you have Brendan Hymus come in. Trey, obviously, not really 100% at this point. He was questionable coming into this game. So you were working through some attrition on that offensive lineup against a really, really good defense. But yeah, you have the 57 pass attempts. He completes 37 of those. You mentioned it. Some of them were just little checkdowns, like Austin Eckler was 10 of 16 for 47 yards through the air. And you just sort of find a way, like you mentioned it. And so, I don't know, I just think looking overall, to me, it's an encouraging sign that they found that way last night against Denver, against a huge divisional rival where you can go up 2-1 in the division, which is great. Just in, as opposed to years past where maybe this game goes a different way. However, I was kind of expecting a tie at that point. Like, God bless Dean Leonard and Jasir Taylor and Dustin Hopkins for ending that whole thing, because time was ticking down and it was like, guys, what are we doing here? Like,
the Broncos, Hayley, the Broncos are about to get their third possession in overtime with 5 minutes remaining.
So I was doing this thing on Twitter where I was like, Denver will punt with kind of like the swirly eye thing. And then I had Chargers will punt with the swirly eye thing. And then Denver will punt. And the second time I tried to write one of those, Twitter literally gave me a bump, like a message that said, "You've already tweeted this." And I'm like, yeah, I know Twitter, but I couldn't even do it again. That even Twitter was like, "What are you doing here, girl? Like, you've already tweeted this." And I'm like, yeah, we know, Jack, but are you watching this game right now? So what was funny was that was when I was about, I got that message on the second when I was going to say that the Chargers were about to punt again. And then, of course, the turnover happens and the muff punt happens and all of that. So saved it, Twitter, but just hilarious in that regard. Just a really funny side story of how that whole night ended on my social media accounts here.
That's amazing, actually.
Didn't know you can't tweet the same thing, apparently. Who knew? Now we know.
Twitter looks out for that type of thing.
Twitter looks out for that kind of thing.
Eric, we knew it was going to be a battle between Surtain and Mike Williams. And this is why I'm not as concerned about the Chargers offense as maybe some may be today. No Corey. We're seeing the passing attack kind of lose a little steam without Keenan. Like, we've progressively kind of seen that, right? No Keenan, no Corey. You got Pat Surtain, who is playing really better than any corner in football right now.
Yeah.
He locked up Mike yesterday, 2 for 17. No Josh Kelly, too. That's another thing. Josh was running the ball really hard, didn't even get a touch because he got hurt early, I believe, on special teams. So he didn't even have a touch in this game. So I think that perfect storm, plus going up against a really good defense, we know Justin's been battling through this rib thing. I'm not as concerned with the offense looking a little out of sorts against a really good Denver defense.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm not overly concerned either. I think we're at the point now where the offense needs Keenan Allen, though, because he got injured in the first half of week 1, and it's like, okay, he'll miss a game or two, and now he's missed every game so far. It seems trending in the right direction that he's going to return against Seattle before the bye, and that'll be a good time to ease him in, like try to get him in there, and then he has another week off, to make sure everything's good to go. But yeah, I think a big reason of what makes this Chargers offense go in the passing attack is obviously having Keenan and Mike together, having that two-headed monster at receiver. And, yeah, Pat Surtain is playing out of his mind. And if he's going to lock down one guy, you need another guy on the other side to step up. And Keenan or Mike should be the guy to do that. And with no Keenan, it's just tough to see it. We joke about this podcast being named the final drive. I will give credit to the Chargers' final drive. It was only, I think, an 8-yard drive or 6-yard drive, whatever it was. That final pass from Justin to Mike, if that doesn't happen, I don't know if Dustin makes the kick because they were almost out of his range. Mm-hmm. Because he said his range was like in the 30s. It was a 39-yard attempt. If they don't complete that, it's like a 47-yarder. Is he making it? I don't know. And then, then we have a tie, like Hayley said. So, from what we know, like, Corey should be back. He was just dealing with an illness. Keenan should be back for Seattle. Hopefully Trey feels better. But yeah, at full strength, this offense is fine. They just haven't really been at full strength, maybe the entire year, honestly, because like Keenan's been hurt since the first half of week 1, like I said. Yeah. So long term, I think they'll be okay. It's just kind of grinding it out right now.
I'm just going through some of these questions, Hayley. Some fans submitted late last night. Let's just start with defense and J.C. Jackson. Obviously, he had a few tough plays in the first half. Michael Davis came in, and I thought the defense played really, really good last night after figuring out Russell Wilson at the beginning of the game. With J.C., they're asking what's going on, miscommunication. I think there is some miscommunication, and I think it's just something that we'll have to monitor this week. You hope JC can get back to form because, listen, his tape doesn't lie from New England, right? But I give Michael Davis credit for coming in and doing his thing in the second half.
I'll give the coaching staff credit, too, for actually making that change because that's a big thing in order to bench a guy who you paid a ton of money and signed as this bona fide, stud corner in the offseason. And so for Brandon Staley to admit after the game, like, we felt like we needed to make a change, to me, that's big because that is making an adjustment that necessarily isn't being too prideful to make, if you will, that they knew they had to adjust something there. I was reading Daniel Popper after the game, and he was talking to Bryce Callahan, and Callahan had said that he really felt like once Michael Davis got in there, they relaxed on the MEs or the mental errors, that those kind of just stopped, that they were able to sort of settle down, like you mentioned it, and go. And it is something I think that will be interesting to watch over these next couple games or this next game. And then obviously you have the bye. And of course, during the bye, you always hear teams do self-scouting and see what happens there. But to me, as big as it was for Michael Davis to come in and make that play, I thought it was almost even bigger for the coaching staff to actually make that decision in game, which is a bold one, if you will, because you don't necessarily see that often. I'm not sure what's going on there. And there's been obviously, the ankle thing and some other thing, the ankle thing and then coming back and going out and coming back again. And I don't know if it's just going to kind of need that the JC just needs to get in a rhythm and needs to sort of just get his legs under him, literally and figuratively, and go. But this is going to be an interesting storyline to watch. But to me, the biggest thing was just the fact that this coaching staff wasn't afraid to make that decision, which ultimately was a better decision for the defense and the team as a whole as the game went on.
Yeah, they played great in the second half. Eric, we got some questions about Keenan coming back, and then also the receiver room in general right now. We saw Palmer's been battling through some stuff. Parham just came back. I know he's a tight end.
And then goes
someone
out.
asked, why isn't there urgency to replace Guyton as a deep threat? I think when you get Keenan back, that's a big thing. But I'd love to get your thoughts on maybe trying to get a guy who could kind of take the top off and really make this passing attack a little more versatile.
Yeah, I've gotten some of those questions too for my Wednesday mailbag. OBJ has been a name that people have thrown around, but from all I understand with that, like, he's not ready right now, and he's not going to be ready for another month. So to me, that's not really a name to focus on until he's healthy, and then when he is healthy, like, then he gets to pick the team. So I don't know about that. I think losing Guyton was maybe bigger than people thought. He didn't have a ton of catches, but the ones he did have were obviously, down the field. He was a deep play threat. I firmly believe that Keenan coming back is going to open up this entire offense. And maybe we don't see it against Seattle because, like I said, that's going to be his first game back. You can't expect him to be at 100% and do too much right away. But the second half of the season, I think the passing attack will flourish. And, by then Justin should be feeling better. Like, it seems like he's feeling better every week. In terms of adding someone outside, I don't know. Like, Robbie Anderson was a name that was brought up by people, but he just got traded to Arizona, so he's not available anymore. I think you might just have to go with who you have. The trade deadline is November 1st, I believe, which is right after the bye. So we'll have to kind of monitor that in the next couple of weeks. I don't know, honestly. I think you just go with Keenan and Mike. You hope Josh gets healthy as that number 3. I think Gerald Everett's been good. I think you mentioned Donald. I thought he played well last night, kind of getting back into the groove. 3 catches for 53 yards. That's just who they have right now. And obviously Eckler is a big part of the passing game too. So I don't see any like big additions coming. I think this is who we have, and we have to make it work.
All good points. Hayley, this is a tough question. Who's more important to the offense, Keenan Allen or Corey Lindsley? It's 1 and 1A, but before you answer, let me just say, we saw the 6 quarters Corey wasn't in there, and we saw
Yeah.
how tough it was for the Chargers offense yesterday. Keenan is a Pro Bowler, and if the Chargers are going to get to the playoffs, Keenan's going to have to be there. But man, the center's a big deal.
Center's a big deal. It's a really, really big deal. I think when you look at how the Chargers have approached that position over the last, say, 5, 6, 7 years or so, call it the LA era of the Chargers. What have they done? They've gone out and they've gotten these veteran guys who have played a lot of football and are really some of the best at their position. You look at Mike Pouncey and what he was able to provide with Phillip Rivers, and then he unfortunately gets hurt in 2020, right? And then Dan Feeney had to step in at center for that season. But then, Feeney leaves in 2021, and who do they bring in? Corey Lindsley, arguably the best center in the game. And I think when you look at you mentioned those 6 quarters, the football that they have played without him, it's a glaring omission on that offensive line, and not only in a protection situation, but also just a stability situation as a whole, and what he brings with a young quarterback who, again, is not 100%, physically right now. And Justin last night, to me, got knocked around probably the most he's been since that Kansas City game. And I think that also contributes with the performance of the offensive line. I don't think we had seen him get knocked down so much, not just sacked, but like pushed to the ground and knocked down and kind of messed with in that regard. So I don't know. It is like a 1A, 1B sort of situation, but the presence that Corey brings and why he was brought to this team to provide stability, to be paired up with an extremely intelligent and talented but young quarterback and provide that sort of relationship, the one that he had with Aaron Rodgers for years. Eric was in the NFC North. He could attest to watching the Packers twice a year and what that did for that offense. It is a loss in that regard when he isn't in there with how much he brings. And the thing with offensive linemen, right? You never want to hear their numbers called. They want to be the guys that just go through the game without anyone mentioning them. But when one of them isn't in there and you're sitting here Tuesday morning quarterbacking, if you will, looking at the game, you go, yeah, that guy's extremely, extremely important to this offense.
And, just some context for those listening to this. Think about the offensive line right now, okay? They didn't have Rashawn Slater or Corey Lindsley yesterday. You were down to your third center at one point in the game. Yeah. So, Will Clapp's filling in for Corey Lindsley. Matt Filer is at his best when Corey Lindsley's in the football game. You have 2 rookies out there, Jamari Sawyer and Zion Johnson. And you have a right tackle on Trey Pipkins who gutted it out last week who was hurt. So that was the offensive line that they had to roll out on Monday Night Football against perhaps the best defense in football. I mean, that defense is really, really good. So it's a great segue, Eric, into this next question. What does it say about this team to come out, get a win against all odds when it would be understandable to take an L against an elite defense after 2 road wins? Are we finally beginning to witness the tenacity of this 2022 roster that refuses to take an L? That's from Dowsey.
Man, I love it.
Love
Dowsey's ready. And you know what? Hold on. Shout out to Dowsey because this was at 1:21 a.m. So he was thinking about this. He was fired up.
Man, bringing the tenacity in the early wee hours. Yeah, I think that's a good word. Hayley mentioned like me being in the NFC North, right? So I'll say this: when I came over to the Chargers, my perception, I think a lot of the outside perception was, hey, this is going to be a high-flying offense. We're going to score 35, 40 points a game. We're going to just be like high octane. It's going to be fun to watch. It hasn't really been that way, through the first 6 games, and injuries have played a part, with Rashawn and Keenan and, Justin, and you can probably almost name everyone on offense who's been banged up at one point. But, yeah, I think tenacity is a great word because it's almost like the Chargers are having to find different ways to win than just relying on the offense scoring 35 points. And yesterday, that was a defense limiting Denver to 16 points. That's the best point total the Chargers defense has allowed all year. I think at this point early in the year, you just find ways to win games to help yourself in the second half. Because, 4-2 looks a lot better than 3-3. And
No question, especially in this mediocre NFL that we're in right now, in terms of just middle of the pack teams,
Woof.
man. Like, who's dominant outside the Bills and the Eagles?
Yeah. I mean, I thought about it this morning on my long drive in. The Chargers are 4-2, and that tied for the second best record in the AFC. A month ago or 3 weeks ago, we were at 1-2, and I think people were ready to write us off. I really do. And we rallied back with 3 straight wins, 2 on the road. All of them have been by, 7 points or less. Houston, Cleveland, and Denver. That's how you have to win in the league. And I forget who said it last night in the locker room, but someone was like, we would love to go in, and I think it was Dustin Hopkins. Every team would love to get a blowout win every week, for sure. The players would love that. The coaches would love that. We would love that as journalists. It would make our jobs easier too. But that's just not how it goes. So, if you can grind out wins, squeak out wins, the Chargers are sitting at 4-2. If they can get a win Sunday against Seattle, they'll be 5-2 at the bye. I think that'll be a pretty impressive 5-2 considering how the first month of the season went.
Hayley, this next question from D-Hop is the GOAT. I guess you could change your username to different things at any moment. So D-Hop is the GOAT
Sure.
for the moment. What will it take for Isaiah Spiller and JT Woods to get playing time? And then this one from Xavier, just kind of along the same lines. If Joshua Kelly's good to go next week, does Sony get more touches? I would say this could be a spot for Isaiah Spiller, depending on Josh's injury, going up against a Seattle defense that, does give up some rushing yards. But I'll let you speak on Isaiah and JT.
Yeah, I would be with you on that one. This is sort of an interesting question that I just generally have for Brandon Staley or whoever on this coaching staff, just in terms of, how high you pick those guys. And I think the dichotomy, too, of last night when you have Dean Leonard and Jasir Taylor making ultimately the plays of the game.
Just thinking that, yeah.
Was so interesting to me because those guys were selected much later. Dean Leonard had, I think we would all agree, sort of a rough preseason to the point where we weren't even sure, hey, is this, is he going to be a practice squad guy? Is he going to make this roster? And he does. And then you look at, I think, the special teams part of it. That what's the thing we always hear with rookies, right? You make your hay on special teams, and those guys certainly came in. And I don't know if that's where maybe JT and Isaiah, I don't want to necessarily use the phrase are lacking right now, but maybe just those other guys have sort of just taken the reins. But the Joshua Kelly injury potentially is going to be one to watch only because of that. Because I thought Sony Michel last night was fantastic in short yardage situations. And I thought he really helped this offense grind it out and go and, the 3rd and 1s, 3rd and 2s, 2nd and 1s, whatever it was. He did a fantastic job. And, I just think of this line that Brandon Staley had last week, and it reflects, I think he said it for both the offense and the defense, and it's the more that we play together, the better that we will be. Sony Michel was brought in so late. He was a late add, if you will, to this offense and this team as a whole. A very similar situation he was in the prior year with the Rams, where he was traded and it was like, all right, let's get in and go. And that's kind of what he did here with the Chargers. But it'll be one to watch with those two, the JT and Isaiah. But I just think, again, sort of the dichotomy of the two sort of later round picks making sort of the plays of the game was a really interesting one to me. But we'll see. We'll see. Sometimes it just takes longer, I think, for guys to get going. And special teams, I think, is one of those things. Not a lot of guys play on it. It's new. But if you're young in this league, it's the one thing where you can sort of make a name for yourself and get that playing time to hopefully get you in on your respective offense-defense situations as well.
Hayley, all excellent points. And it makes me think about, when free agency hits and we're getting ready for the draft, everyone's trying to predict where these teams are going to go. And we always say, wait to see who gets drafted, because this rookie class at some point will make an impact.
Yeah.
How about the fact that it was 2 6-rounders and a 7th rounder, right? Jamar Sawyer playing left tackle in place of Rashawn Slater, and then Jasir and Dean Leonard making the play of the game to set up Dustin Hopkins. And who knows? We talk about Isaiah Spiller and JT Woods. It's a long season, man. Spiller could be in there as early as Sunday for all we know, and he could have an impact towards the back half of the year. Maybe they rediscover a running game with him and Josh or him and Sony. We don't know what the future is going to hold. So long season. Our guy Arnie asked, why does it seem like the offense is struggling? Are expectations too high? I think we answered that. I think they're just trying to make things work right now with what they got and hopefully get healthy. So, hey, we appreciate all the questions, guys. Real quickly, as we close this, just moving on to Seattle on a short week, Eric. Gino's kind of cooking in the Pacific Northwest. A former Charger comes down here. We're going to see Uchenna Nwosu back at SoFi Stadium. This is not going to be an easy game for the Chargers, and it would be great for them to finish strong, get to 5-2 before their bye.
Yeah, it's kind of what I hit on earlier. Like, if you can win 4 straight and get to 5-2 at the bye, that's almost like a reset, given the craziness, really, of the first 7 games with injuries and close games and, ups and downs and all that. There's a phrase that I've heard in my time in the NFL. It's called empty the bucket. And I thought about that this morning. Like, I think it's time for the Chargers to empty the bucket this week, because after this, you obviously get a week off and you can rest up and try to get healthy. But this is a big week because you have to give it everything you have. Because much like I said, 4-2 looks better than 3-3. 5-2 looks way better than 4-3, right? Mm-hmm. And I know we like to kind of peek ahead a little bit. If you're 5-2 at the bye, you've already kind of set yourself up fairly well for a second half run at the playoffs. That doesn't mean you're going to get in by any means for sure, but I think the first half of the season is just putting yourself in position to be in position to have a chance at the playoffs in the second half. And if you're 5-2, you're in a fairly good spot. Seattle has been plucky, I think, so far this year. I think a lot of people, maybe peg them to be a top 5 pick already, preseason. But yeah, they've hung in there. They put up some points for sure. So another good test for the Chargers defense, and we'll see who comes back on offense and see how that unit can fare against a decent Seattle defense.
Tell you what, Eric, we empty the bucket after these Monday night and primetime games, getting up early for the final drive. That's one of the things we're there, man.
Always.
Hayley, the AFC is just kind of a jumbled situation right now. The 49ers play the Chiefs this Sunday. The 4-2 Jets play the Broncos. So, talk about an opportunity before your bye to kind of get a leg up. Shoot, if the Niners and that defense can shut down Patrick Mahomes, Chargers could be in first place in the West at their bye.
Yeah, that would be huge. This is such a weird – it's so funny. Every year you get the offseason hype and you get the storylines. And by all means, did the AFC West look to be this juggernaut of a division? And I remember, Chris, I went on with you and Jim Hill in training camp, and I'm like, in all my years in the AFC West, I've never seen it look like this before. It is by far the best division in the NFL. Well, here we are.
Hey, you know what? You were right. The first part was right. We've never seen anything like this.
We've never seen anything like this. Good point. It would be huge. When it comes to Seattle, though, I'm going to throw, when we have this conversation about rookies, 2 names to keep your eyes on, and that's Kenneth Walker, rookie running back, and Tariq Woolen, rookie cornerback, who has an interception in 4 straight games. Kenneth Walker put up 97 yards on the ground, stepping in for Rashad Penny. Looking at sort of just the box score of Seattle, Arizona had more total yards, more rushing yards, and more passing yards than the Seahawks last week, but it didn't matter at the end of the day. Seattle, if you want to talk about a team that's kind of finding ways to win, they're 3-3 atop, tied in the NFC West. These wild West divisions here are just fantastic, if you will. So I'm going to throw those 2 names out. And then when you mention Uchenna, if you don't think that guy is going to come into SoFi with his hair on fire this week, I just think you need to check yourself, because I'm fully expecting Chen 10, as he is going by now with his new number, to come in. But if you can get a win, and even though it's an NFC opponent, and if you can get that win and get to 5-2, you mentioned it, Eric. Every week you have sort of that slight different one game differential. 5-2 just, it sounds so much better. You hit it on the head than 4-3 would, especially at your bye, when I think you want to go in riding a hot streak, take a little bit of a break, self-scout yourself, and then get back to it. That would be huge. That would be really, really huge. The Broncos-Jets game is also fascinating. The Jets are playing really good football right now. Who knew?
Yeah.
Who knew? It's the NFL.
Yeah, Jets could go to 5-2 with a win over the Denver Broncos, which is wild. And I'll say this too: 5-2, and these three wins, 2 on the road and the one last night, none of them were very pretty, right? Houston got back into the game late. We all know what happened at the end of the Cleveland game, and then it was just a back and forth, not much offense, special teams gutting it out for the Chargers. So when you're not playing your best ball and you're winning, and it's early in the year, man, you take those, because you're going to look back, if you are kind of hitting your stride late, being like, shoot, thank goodness we won in weeks 4, 5, and 6, because we weren't playing our best ball, and that could be the difference between the playoffs and staying home in January. You guys have any final thoughts as we get out of here and get on to Seattle? That's it.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Tuesday.
Empty the bucket.
Mike is
Tuesday.
dropped.
It's time to go back to work.
The bucket is emptied. Yeah, Haley.
Done.
All right, guys.
Dry.
Hey, we always appreciate you listening, watching. We'll be back next Monday after the Chargers take on the Seahawks and get into their bye. For Haley and Eric, I'm Chris. This has been The Final Drive.